Get ready to embark on a journey of resilience and healing with Building Bulletproof Backs. In this captivating podcast, we explore the inspiring stories of real-life back pain sufferers who have overcome challenges to find a path to wellness. Led by Meera, a seasoned physiotherapist with over 25 years of experience, each episode delves into the transformative power of holistic healing strategies that empower individuals to reclaim their lives from the grips of pain. Join us as we uncover innovative solutions and offer a beacon of hope to all those seeking relief and a brighter future.
Hey there, listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Building a Bulletproof Back podcast. I have Meera with me today, who has an amazing story that I think is going to be really beneficial to some of you that are listening right now in a whole world of pain. We are talking about pain. We're going to be talking about how to alter your relationship with it, which is, I guess, fits under the modality of a mental and emotional strategy that we can bring to pain. Sometimes we talk about movement, sometimes we talk about core fitness, but I think with stubborn back pain, we need to be exploring all facets of the experience. And I think Meera is going to help us shed a little bit of light on certainly her experience. So thank you for your time, Meera, and over to you. Start sharing.
Thanks, Marion, and thanks for having me on the show. It's wonderful to be here. And I love to be able to share about my story, actually, because it's been so transformational in the most unexpected of ways. And just for me, I think to start at the beginning, really what started my back pain. I was only 12 years old, and I slipped
that's
on.
So young.
Yeah, I know. I know. So obviously I was just in secondary school, is what we call it here in the UK. And I slipped on some soap while doing some washing up at my grandparents' retirement party, and I landed on my coccyx. And nothing really hurt as such to start with. Obviously, the initial fall hurt, but I just couldn't walk for a little while. So it really jarred my entire system, I think. And so from that moment on, I started seeing an osteopath, and I was always getting aches and pains and tight spots and sometimes I'd wake up of a morning and just be in excruciating pain and not be able to go to school and need to go and have an emergency appointment. And so it started all around that time. So it's very young, really. And so I actually can't remember a time before that, really. But wow. For me, I think it's been remarkable to see how things have gone on. Things obviously got an awful lot worse before they got better. I experienced what I've been told is a rare condition when I became pregnant with my second child. With the first one, it was okay, which is called symphysis pubis dysfunction. And it's the ligament at the front of the pelvic bone that just stops working, stops functioning properly. And so that left me not being able to walk. And then obviously pregnant, so going through labour and everything was really, really difficult. And afterwards, nothing went back together right. And so that's a different part of the body, but it's the structure of the whole of the spine. So that's just led to absolutely excruciating pain, and not just, times when it was excruciating, just permanently, 24/7, day and night. It was really difficult to sleep. It was difficult to function. That for me was a really, really low point. Which as it went on, when my son was only a few years old, I didn't want to be here anymore. I was done, I really didn't want to live. And so I did make an attempt on my life. Thankfully, I was caught in the process of it, so it never happened. But for me, that was when my life started, because strangely, at the lowest point in my life, I had an amazing, what you might call transcendent experience, because I went from deeply suffering to absolute pristine peace. It's just the bottom dropped out of my world in a good way. All the edges, all the friction, all the pressure just disappeared. And there wasn't even the idea of pain in that experience, actually, which is where the theme from my book came from. Peace or pain is a choice, dependent on where your attention is, dependent on if there's any resistance. And so for me, that experience. And I thought, well, if I can have that now, you know, when this is my lowest point, if I can have this level of peace with so much serenity and contentment and joy, surely I can have that, you know, in the rest of the time. And so even when that experience then faded and the pain came back again, it gave me something really tangible to hang on to, like that hope. And also the direct knowing from the experience that there is another way. I can have a different experience. And so I kind of moved away from the trying to fix myself and mend my back pain and mend myself because I'm broken in some way, and actually became more about being the pure awareness that I now know that I am, that we all are. And when we have an awareness of that, of presence, our experience of our back pain, any pain, utterly changes. So it's like there's two operating modes, one where there is the option of suffering and one where there's no suffering. So pain's always possible. For example, acute pain, you know, if you have an accident or something in the moment, like if you go and see the dentist, for example, that still hurts. But it's when it goes into long-term chronic pain where it starts to become suffering. We call it pain, but it's actually a secondary pain of suffering, which is a reaction. It's something we're doing. It's a habitual reaction. And recognizing that gives us the choice for peace in any given moment. And I started to get more and more tastes of that. So when I went on retreats with so I found the Ashayas for a start, and that utterly changed my life. And I became one. We're a group of monks. It's non-religious.
Sorry, I was going to say, can you explain what the Ashayas are?
Yeah, sure, for sure. So yeah, as Ashayas, we are basically a non-religious organisation, and really the foundation in it is being yourself. So it's very, very simple and basic in a way. And there are vows that you take, but they're my core values anyway, you know, like honesty, non-violence and things like that. So for me, it was all a, you know, no-brainer that this is what resonated for me. And what really caught my attention was the lack of judgment in the Ashayas that I met. There was no judgment towards me. There was no seeing me as a victim to my circumstance. So it's almost like they saw me in my perfection, and that enabled me to actually start to tap into the inner state of being who and what I really am without the mind telling me who I am. Because that's the thing, we don't realize how much the mind governs our experience. There's a pure experience of this moment, which is our birthright and our natural state of being. Very, very natural. Like, this is not something you have to do. It's an undoing of all the habits and the belief system and the way we've learned to perceive the world, to behave within the world. And so it's really easy to change. And we use a practice called Ascension. And the Ascension techniques are very simple and they're mechanical. So they just bring you back to an experience of presence and enliven it. So it becomes easier to consciously recognize it, you know, to actually have that as a direct living experience. And so on one of these retreats, I had this experience where the pain was just building up and up and up and up and up. And I thought, I'm going to go bonkers here, you know, like I can't take it anymore. This is getting to the levels that I can't cope with again. And I went and asked a teacher for help. And, you know, they just looked at me with such kind, compassionate, accepting, loving eyes, and just invited me, could I let the pain be here right now in this moment? And, you know, I kind of wanted to scream at them and go, no, that's why I came to you for help. I want the pain gone. I want it gone. Yeah. And instead they were just going, but could you let it be here right now in this moment? And it was kind of already here. So I'm like, all right then, you know, and in that moment where I just actually surrendered and just went, okay, you've got me. I'm just going to do what you ask and let it be here 100%. And in that moment, the pain vanished, like without a trace, and it stayed away. And for me, I'm just like, what just happened? And it was quite a shock that I could go from one moment in extreme pain to the next moment utterly gone. And it's almost just like I was looking for it, like where is it? And yet it was just gone. And it did eventually come back, because the habit always reasserts itself until we establish the new one more, solidly. So it's kind of a back and forth dance, with 1 minute I could just be using the Ascension techniques and all pain gone and easy. It might last into my everyday life a little bit, and it was becoming more and more sustainable. And so I ended up wanting to become an Ashaya, because for me, this is just wow, people need to know what is possible. And I want this. I want to see what else is possible in my own experience. So I went on the course, which was in northern Spain for 6 months. And an awful lot of that was just really deepening your own experience. So when you teach, you're teaching from experience and not from a concept. And so there's no kind of ego in there. It's really just the purity of the teaching coming through, which is really important for us. And that's what makes the biggest difference for us, helping others find that, because we're already having the experience. Otherwise, it's kind of understanding something theoretically, reading the book about it, and then trying to teach somebody else. And it's really, you need the experience. And on that retreat, I had another quite transcendent experience where I was, again, the pain was building up, and I was also struggling to walk. It was going up a hill, and it was all I could do. I had to stop several times on the way up. And by the time I got to the top of the hill, just relief that I was there and I could now relax. And I just sat down. I couldn't even walk into the room, the meditation room. I was so exhausted and the pain was so intense. And I just sat down and cried. And I was just I can't do this. How am I going to manage on this beautiful location? But it's a hillside. So it was up and down hills. And I just remember, again, just thinking, what do I do? And the previous night, there'd been a talk about pain, presenting this idea that there is a choice between peace or pain in any given moment. And in my desperation, I was just well, I want peace. I want peace. I want peace. I want peace. And in that moment, again, I was just transformed into just a really beautiful, gentle experience of peace. And there wasn't even an idea of pain and it being gone. There was just peace. And so again, these experiences kind of built on and on and on, really. So it became more stable, it became more tangible, and I got to see how to choose for that, rather than it being a spontaneous, release in the moment, because I wasn't quite sure how it was happening. I knew it was happening. I knew there was surrender involved, but surrender often is something we try to do, and you can't try to do surrender from the mind. It's a coming back to self, and it's where you have your attention. And so that became more and more apparent to me. And so that's why I then wanted to share that. And I've kind of become the specialist on pain in the Ashaya community, because I know what it's like. And just to give one more example as well, because this was the long-term chronic pain, that then just, I kind of got a handle on, and I still have the condition now, for example. It could still lead to me not being able to walk sometimes, but even that's falling away. There's a strength that's coming into my back, which is quite surprising, actually. There was one more example, which was then acute pain. I broke my ribs, and with broken ribs, I'm well, no, I'm just going to have to put up with this pain. And the immobility from it, I don't know if you've ever had anything broken, particularly with ribs, you can't move, you can't breathe, you can't smile. If you sneeze, it's a nightmare, And so I'm well, for me, I wanted to explore and see what was possible within this experience. And so after a few days, I think it was around a week of suffering, I started to explore with what I knew, to just allow 100% and notice the stillness and silence that I'd now being able to choose for consciously. And within that experience, I got little fleeting times where the pain just went, all suffering fell away, and I could still feel the sight of the broken ribs. So the sensation was still there, but the judgment about the sensation, this is it, seeing the thinking and the whole story about the pain, that fell away. And with that, the suffering falls away. And not only did the pain go, I could also reach and grab my drink without being winded. So it's it freed up my body. There was a looseness, I suppose, and a relaxation in there when I was fully present and allowing of the pain. And so, yeah, I just continued on from that day. That was in 2013 when I broke my ribs. And, since then it's been more about helping others.
I've got so many questions. I feel like we need to back to the first 2 minutes. I didn't want to interrupt you. Can we start with, not to devalue the fact you made an attempt on your life and not to dwell on it, but can I ask, was it purely the intensity of your pain, like tripled by being a new mum and maybe not sleeping and, 100 other factors on top of that? Was it purely trying to escape the pain that drove you to that? The physical pain or the suffering and everything that was attached to it?
Well, for a start, I don't think you can have physical pain without there being mental and emotional pain. I think that comes with it. Mm-hmm. There's more of a component of emotional pain than we realise. So for me, it was just, but in that moment, I would have answered you, yeah, it's a physical pain. I need that physical pain to stop. It was just mind numbing. It was relentless, and I couldn't live like that anymore. But it wasn't just the pain; it was the inability to move. I had 2 young kids. I couldn't, get down on the floor and play with them. I couldn't put my own socks. I could dress myself, So like for me, I just felt like a worthless human being. But the primary factor was I just needed that pain to stop.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And then you rapidly jumped from that into, you had a experience of transformation, basically, where you went from experiencing such mind-numbing pain to a transcendence of that. How did you get from that to that in that very first experience?
Well, I mean, in that moment, I had no clue how I got to that because it's just like it spontaneously happened. But now with my understanding, there was just surrender. Like I totally and utterly surrendered to the moment. Like I didn't want to be there. So I was just like, I don't care what happens. I'm done, and that was actually a surrender. And within that, with, looking into my son's eyes with just the purity and the innocence in that, it just transported me into his world, if you like. So it's like looking into his eyes was just a sea of peace. And I think with
and love,
the state, exactly, absolutely unconditional love. And like children are, are there for you. No matter what you do, no matter how much you mess up as a parent, they love you unconditionally. And I think it was that unconditional love that just caught my attention for a moment, I suppose. I stopped with the struggling and pushing against the experience, and I just fully opened up into just being in that moment. And I know anyone who does that for whatever reason triggers it, then you will experience peace, and it will be a transcendent experience because it will be so far removed from the world of suffering that you've been living in that it will be mind-blowing, and it will be forever. It will forever alter the course of your life because you will see what is possible as a direct living experience, not just as a lovely concept that somebody tells you. So for me, in some respects, I don't know how it happened, but in others I do. It was surrender.
Well, I think the surrender and the allowance of love are almost on the same spectrum, aren't they? When we totally surrender, and then you have the eyes of your son looking at you with pure love. You probably had that very fleeting window of dropping resistance and allowing love in a minuscule of time that was just something that changed the default programming that was circulating up until that point. A few more questions, though, about having back pain at 12. How did your parents handle a 12-year-old with pretty intense back pain?
It was really about fixing me. My dad was a dentist, and so he was a scientist. And so for him, the body's a mechanical thing. And so if there's something wrong with it, then it just needs altering or bolting together or something along those lines. And so at that point in time, I was just taken to an osteopath. And in some respects, that's maybe a little bit more forward thinking and open-minded of them. But that is what helped. It did help with the pain, and it managed the pain. So yeah, that was their approach.
But it also probably gave you the message as a kid that something was broken and something did need fixing. I guess if you went to multiple practitioners, and what would you, in hindsight, is there anything you would encourage a parent to do differently with a child in that situation?
Well, with what I know now, it would be more about supporting the child in their emotional world with how they are coping with life, whether they feel supported, because I do feel like the body reflects how we feel as a person. And so if we don't feel supported in life, I think the back, legs, pelvic area, we're going to have issues with that. Because the body is like the mind and the body is one thing. In my experience, we talk about mind-body connection, and we see that, every thought that we have is felt in the body. Every emotion that we have is felt in the body. And so for me, it's like the dumping ground. Everything ends up there. And if we don't resolve and learn to process our emotions, then the body suffers. And I think the back is one of the main areas where we don't feel supported, we don't feel loved, and we can be loved. Like my parents loved me, and I knew they loved me, but I don't think I saw it demonstrated in my everyday life. For example, I was bullied at school around this time when I'm just realizing this now, actually, I was bullied at school, and around that time was probably the worst bullying that I experienced. And so one of the things my mum would say to me was just like, sticks and stones may hurt your bones, but names will never hurt you. And like for me, I'm like, but it does hurt though. It does hurt. I feel so lost and alone and abandoned in the environment at school, and nothing was done in those days. Bullying wasn't addressed by teachers, so you just had to silently put up with it and suffer. And I think that's what led, knowing what I know now, I think that's what led to the back pain. And so I think for me, parents, you support yourself primarily, actually, and that's what my next book's going to be about, is that until the parents look after their own experience, they're not necessarily going to be like, my mum didn't know what she didn't know how much that made it harder for me. She just didn't know. She was trying to help me in the only way she knew how, and I think we are always doing the best that we know how. But for me, it's just like going beyond that and understanding, well, what actually is going to make a difference, and supporting somebody, knowing that they are loved and are seen and heard, and that you are going to step up and do something about it, and nurture your own experience as a parent, because that's what I've seen with my own children, who are now 20 and 23, that I've passed on some of those patterns from my mum unwittingly, when I swore I never would. I'm never going to become like that. And my mum's a lovely lady. You would probably love her. She's very, very kind and gentle, but very fearful. And so that fear comes across as control. And struggling in her own experience, she couldn't then be there, to regulate her own emotions, so I couldn't regulate mine. And yeah, I just felt abandoned, and there was no support, and that's my back.
So here's a question. Do you think you would be an Ashaya monk today if you hadn't had your back pain experience?
Oh, do you know what? I don't think I would. For me, all the bad stuff in my life, all the suffering led me to the moment and pushed me beyond the day-to-day experience that most people have to want to go for more. And I don't think if I hadn't had that level of pain, I don't think I would go for more. And I am actually really, really grateful for every experience, because it's brought me to where I am right now. And I think pain actually has become a signpost for me. Like whenever there's any tension, I don't experience it so much as pain now. There's certainly not the suffering, but there's still tension and a pressure in my body, tense spots in my body. And so for me, it's always an invitation to see, how am I managing life? Where are my emotions at? Is there something bothering me? Is there something, whether it's, in the moment at hand, or whether and usually even if it is, it's something from the past that's triggered us, some place where we're holding on to an idea about ourselves that is dysfunctional and isn't really serving us. And so for me, it enables me to open up into a greater and greater awareness of who and what I am as a direct experience. And so I welcome pain in, actually. And the more you welcome it in, the more you go beyond it, and the more you recognize that it's just there to help you be the greatest version of yourself ultimately.
And I often say that to patients, but there's a there's a time when you can say that, and there's a time when it's a triggering comment. But certainly I think reframing our relationship with pain is a lot of what I do, because I think if we perceive it differently, we experience it differently. And if we take away that it's wrong and that it needs to go and something's not right, and instead we see it as an invitation, a reflection of something that needs a bit of attention. And I do think by the time it ends up in the physical structure, there's been a practiced belief with an emotional addiction to it. And so when you talked about I could choose peace and it would disappear, but then it would come back, and then I would practice again, and then it would, I think you were building the muscle of the beliefs, choices, mental choices, and which is a neurological pathway in the brain if we really dial it down. And it's neuroplastic. You have to build that pathway of consciousness. And almost we can then see the pain as a measure of how you're doing. The better at that I get, the pain responds to that. But then we also shouldn't beat ourselves up if that's taking a long time. It may mean that there's something deeper that we're not seeing. So it's another aspect of our experience in life, and I think we all experience pain in different ways at different times. What are your thoughts then on medicating it? Do you ever see there's a role for the medication of pain?
Yeah, I do actually, because until we get practiced at being able to choose for a different experience, you have to soothe the symptoms or you'll go crazy. So, I think there are times when you do need to medicate. Medication doesn't work for me, which I'm actually very grateful for, because then I had to find another way. But, like having osteopath treatments handled the pain, and along the way, things like EFT helped for a while, drumming helped for a while. And so, I think it's important to soothe the symptoms, to address that in any way that you find it helps. So, a lot of people I talk to, they go, well, if I'm distracted, if I've got friends over, the pain, I don't notice the pain for a little while. And so I just work on that. I build on that and start to get people to recognize that it isn't there all of the time. Therefore, it doesn't need to be there any of the time. But an awful lot of that is just having the compassion and letting people just really just land in this moment and be, and let it hurt, let it be hard for a moment, because that drops that top level of resistance away. And so I'm never kind of pushing people to jump to the end result. It's really like, let's be where we are right now. What one small baby step can we take for you to start to see that the pain isn't as locked in, as solid as you think it is? So once we start to do that, it starts to inform their experience. And then meantime, there's other things and exercises that I do just to start to get them to start meditating, because that always makes the difference. It gives you more conscious choice for a start. But then there are other little things that you can do that just help soothe the symptoms. And I've got a workbook and journal to go with my first book as well, that then has lots of like little tiny bite-sized tips and hints and suggestions and exercises, so people can start to explore their own experience, but be comfortable, to not... sometimes pushing yourself is great, because it gets so horrible that the surrender just happens spontaneously. But other times, like you could destabilize somebody's mental health, and mental health is really, really important within this, because when mental health flares up, it takes away our choice. We get lost in what the thoughts are saying. And it takes away our choice, it takes away our freedom. So it's so important to actually work with somebody where they're at right now, however that looks to them. So what I do with people varies from person to person, dependent on what I suggest and how they respond to what I suggest.
Yeah, of course. And we reinforce that every episode, that the pathway to healing is so unique. It's as unique as a fingerprint. Everyone, all these collective experiences we take on, to get to where we're at now are all informing the permission slips perhaps we give ourselves of what's going to be required to heal or move forward. And so it's very, always working within the belief structure of someone's existing experience is something that I think dictates the uniqueness of what's required moving forward, rather than try and alter their whole mental structure. I think it's working within what they currently believe, challenging a few, but allowing a few, because they hopefully know themselves better than I know them or you know them. So if I say, Meera, a bulletproof back, what does that bring up for you?
For me, a bulletproof back is tapping into the strength that's already there. Like, I think I'd started to believe that my back was very weak. And then I read a book by Dr. John Sarno, who you've probably heard about. And that kind of informed me that actually it might not be mechanical, and that my back actually was stronger than I thought it was. And that actually gave me a little bit of confidence and hope. And so for me, to have that, a flexible, strong, free of all tension, because I think the tension, things that I thought, like I've got scoliosis and I thought that was just the way my spine was formed. Now what I'm starting to recognize is it's tension held my back, pulling my spine from one side to the other, and actually it frees up now. So it's allowing the inner movement of healing to happen, so that you do allow that strength. So it's a difference between force and strength. I think when there's tension in the body, there's forcefulness in there. And then starting to all you have to do is recognize it as well. So for me, the bulletproof back is consciousness and the recognition that there is strength there. And in just even the hope that it is there led to a different experience for me. So and it's very freeing then. And then there's flexibility, like there's flexibility in the way you're thinking, then there's more flexibility in my body. So for me it's that holistic approach rather than the fixing the mechanical aspect.
Yeah, I love that. And what would be your top 3 tips then for someone who's hopefully not in as drastic mind-numbing pain as you found yourself in, but, maybe they're approaching that. Maybe they're losing hope, and, hopefully we can offer hope with these conversations and these shared stories. But to that person who's approaching that dark space, would you have some tips?
I have, a ton of tips.
Keep it to 3.
Yeah. I will.
And then they can get the book.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, one of the things I've been playing with people recently is to put less effort in when you move. Like we move almost like we've got that, with a car and you've got it partially, like my old banger of a Ford Fiesta. I could drive around with the handbrake partially applied and not realise it. And the wear and tear on the car was immense. And I knew there was something wrong. And that for me is just like to when you're moving, like when you're walking, like let your legs do the walking. Because the crazy thing is like often people lean in to the walk and it's almost like their mind is like you're often your thoughts go ahead to where, you're going rather than where you're walking right now. So it's almost like imagining you're walking on the spot, let your legs do the walking and then just put less effort in. If you're typing at the keyboard, notice here and just put less effort in. And everything you do, can you put less effort in? Can you put less effort in? And that can actually lead to an awful lot more flexibility and relaxation in the body, which really, really helps the back pain and any pain actually. So that's my number one tip, I think. For
that's
the moment,
a great
anyway.
one. That's a unique one. We haven't heard that one, and I think the exercise physiologists and the strength and conditioning coaches would be falling off their seats about now. But I love that because it's so aligned with the Feldenkrais concept of ease and flow and grace, and that we move best when relaxed and effortless. And I think we get it wrong with back pain a lot by trying to add more strength, add more tension, add more, if something's not weak, there's no point adding more strength. And, I think that just can really backfire. And it's a myth. I think it's one of the biggest myths of back pain is that everyone needs to have a 6-pack abdominal unit and glutes popping out their backside. It's so much of it is nothing to do with your physical strength. And in fact, your experience of going up the mountain, you know, you can become deconditioned in back pain. That if we're not moving and everything's hurting, we do get deconditioned. But when the pain eases, we naturally have an inclination to want to do a bit more. And in that doing more of the things we love, the strength just returns organically. It doesn't even have to be added to always if you have a fairly active life. So that even that can be a gradual return of just mobility that kicks in as we experience more movements that don't hurt because we've relaxed into them. So that's great. Now, number 2, what would you say? Number 2 tip.
So for me, observing the body without agenda and actually just being where the body is for a start. It's actually crazy how when we're thinking we're like living in the past or the future and we're never right here, right now. So just for a moment to just close your eyes and just be where your body is and just observe your body, almost like it's a science experiment or you're an alien from outer space and you don't know what it's like. You don't know what's going on in there and you just observe. And I've got a little guided meditation on my YouTube channel for that, actually, just called Feeling the Body, so that you can actually just come back to a more pure experience of it without the mind telling you how to experience it. Like, what actually are the physical sensations like right now, and just observe them. And so then the dialogue falls away and you can observe your body without the judgment, without the agenda to heal, without any opinions even. So you can actually have the pure experience, and then your body thrives with your full conscious attention on it, and healing is initiated, and it's very soothing, it's very healing. Pain can intensify at times because it kind of highlights where you're resisting. So the guided meditation can kind of help you so that you don't go into your reactive mode. But that for me is my second tip.
And we'll put that link in the show notes if you could send that to me afterwards. And what's your third tip?
Yeah, and the third tip is to start to recognise the pain story, and in that it's really starting to notice the thoughts that you have about your pain, and not really necessarily do anything with them. You know, for me, I noted them down, and like the more I was aware of the dialogue about my pain, the less that dialogue was in play. Like I became more conscious of it, because for me, suffering is an unconscious process. And if you relate unconsciousness to darkness, so like if you've got a room and it's completely dark, what do? You put the light on. And so starting to be more aware of the dialogue and what's happening in your body. Like if you're suddenly having a really negative thought about your back, what's happening? Where do you feel that in the body? What do you notice? And then you really start to unwrap that pain story, and it falls away by itself just in the recognition of it. So yeah, that's my third tip.
They're great tips. And I can't help, we've come full circle actually. My very first episode of this program I ever did was with a lady called Kay, who found immense relief in Ascension meditation. And we talked about it as a pain relief strategy for her. And she talked about how she practiced it. She wasn't a monk, but she was an everyday person who had a hell of a lot of pain. And she found it a really great adjunct to 100 other things that really just helped her coexist and, surrender a little bit better to the experience. So, yeah, I feel like after 20-something episodes, we've done a full circle, which is kind of nice. Hey, thanks, Meera, for your time today. I really appreciate your tips. You mentioned you've wrote some books. Can you just tell us where listeners could find some of these books of yours if they're interested in your workbook and exploring their own pain experience?
Yeah, sure. They're available on Amazon. So yeah, Peace or Pain is the first book, and then there's a workbook and journal that I've just published actually recently, a few weeks ago, to go with that. That has a card deck in the back of it, printed in the pages, and so it's really bite-sized, and it can help you unpack some of the information that's in the first book, which is in a very conversational story style, by the way. So it's very relatable, because I don't like just cold, hard, dry facts. For me, it's just like bringing it to life so people can relate in their own experience. And then surrender is good for the soul, because resistance is the cause of suffering, is another one. And they're all available on Amazon. You can also find them through the links on my website, which is boundless-meditation.co.uk. And there you'll find the courses that I teach to help people with to learn meditation, to help with pain awareness course, for example. And then there's also links for my YouTube channel, Meera, where I've got a whole ton of video shorts already, and I'm releasing one each week. So if they subscribe, then they can be notified. And then the guided meditations are on there too. So, you can start to actually explore what I'm talking about for your own direct experience, because that's when you know what's true and what's possible.
That's great. I think it's been great chatting to you, and it just, it blows my mind how much is out there for back pain sufferers, which they possibly aren't aware. And I think having access to people like you online is just phenomenal now. The traditional mode of thinking we have to see a physio or an osteo, or I'm not saying we can't, but I think we can add layers that may help us shift a little bit faster if we're really stuck. It's just nice to know there's so many people with so many ideas, so many concepts, so many free resources that, hopefully it just inspires and gives people a bit of hope that darkness can have a bit of a light shone on from time to time by listening. So I really, really appreciate your time, and thanks for being a guest.
Oh, thanks, Marion. It's wonderful to be here. And, and if I could just help one more person recognize that there's another way, then that's very fulfilling for me. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
As we wrap up another empowering episode of Building Bulletproof Backs, remember that your journey to healing is within reach. For more invaluable resources and guidance, visit www.bulletproofbacks.com. Dive deeper into Marion's transformative approach to banishing back pain by exploring her book, From Broken to Bulletproof: Unconventional Ways to Banish Back Pain. Discover the Bulletproof Back System, a holistic framework that integrates mindset, emotional fitness, and quality movement re-education to heal stubborn pain. Whether you're seeking online courses, coaching, or consulting, Marion has you covered on your path to a pain-free life. Until next time, stay resilient and keep moving forward.